Chapter 7. As far as comfort went, the thick-walled adobe jail was an oasis compared with the lean-to that Pat Stevens used as an office. This afternoon, however, the heat that beat on the iron roof was forgotten as the sheriff, Sam, and Ezra listened to Bill's story. Fogged with blue tobacco smoke, the air swirled lazily around their heads. "No, sirree," declared the chunky rider in confusion. "The dude never run off them horses." "He carries all the earmarks of a coyote to me," declared Sam sourly. "And this bushwhacking gent?" inquired Pat. "You got any notions there?" "That must be personal business which I can handle," grinned Bill. "Todd was around town." "I gamble Plumford had the right hunch," the sheriff added to the litter of butts on the floor and commenced to roll in another. "Some gent's sittin' on Pete's mine, and he craves to discourage visitors. Now what I aim to do is give that rattlesnake a chance to hustle my horse. Maybe he'll tip his hand." "That's a right good idea," approved Bill. "Reckon I got the right to sit in, too." Pat caught Ezra's eye. "I reckon we'll need you for a tracker, but Sam—" "I'll drift along to make sure you mavericks are out of trouble," snapped his squat partner. 2 days later, flickering flames lit the bronzed features of the 4 riders that were hunking around a campfire at Needle Rock. Nothing moved in the solitude that hemmed them in, save a lone eagle pinpointed against the darkened bowl overhead. 4 ponies, hobbled, cropping at the scant herbage outside the circle of firelight. Night crept across the barrens. The fires slowly died, and 4 men rolled into slickers and blankets, bulked like huge cocoons around. When nothing remained but embers, glowing red as an uneasy breeze flew through the flats, Bill Williams rose and plodded out towards the cropping ponies. The animals' heads raised, ears pricked up at his approach, and then dropped as he squatted against a boulder and peered into the gray shadowland around. A sliver of moon floated high overhead. Loud in the silent night, a fine shale trickled from the eroding ledges of the Needle, bulking black behind him and spattered on the rocks below. But there was no sign of life in the barrens. At midnight, the chunky rider returned to camp and shook Pat's shoulder. The sheriff awoke on the instant, sat up, and slid on his boots. "Nothing doing," grunted Bill. "And it's darker than a stack of black cats out there." The sheriff restrained his impulse to reach for the makins, buttoned his vest, and slipped on a sleeveless coat. Bill was already stretched out. Silently, Pat picked up his Winchester and faded into the night. He moved forward through the boulders until he could distinguish the lumpy shadows that were the ponies, 3 standing and 1 laying down. Sinking into a comfortable position, Pat carefully propped the Winchester against a rock and composed himself to wait. A stream of conjecture flowed through his mind as he peered into the gloom. If the killer, who was set on Pete's mine, drove off the ponies, how would he get to know that there was a party camped on the Needle Rock? Where did the Englishman fit in? Curious he was around when trouble broke. And who grabbed Phyllis Ford's new gun and gun belt? The breeze dropped, and the fine shale from the heights of the Needle creased sifting down. An eerie silence settled over the wastes. Burnt out and dead, they lay quiet as a catacomb. The Needle shed another spattering shower of shale. Pat's head swiveled, and he eyed its indistinct outline, deep shadows above him. At 2 o'clock he rose and moved back to camp. Sam awoke, threw off the slicker. "Anything stirring?" he yawned. "No, I got an idea. You circle the ponies. Watch them from the far side and keep your eye up on the needle." "What in the hell?" began Sam, argumentative. "Now button up," advised Pat. "I got an idea." "You're always getting ideas and they lead to trouble," grumbled the squat rider. "I'll keep cases on the needle, if'n you say so. It might vamoose before sunup, just like them ponies." With his parting shot, Sam moved out to serve his trick on night guard. Dawn came and showed Ezra beyond the peacefully outcropped ponies. Nothing had occurred to disturb the serenity of the night. Sam and Bill gathered fuel for fire while the sheriff wandered around the needle, examining its eroding walls. Although from the south the pile appeared to consist of a single slender column, rising perhaps 1,500 feet into the air, actually it composed of 4 fingers of rock, standing side by side, the shortest not more than 500 feet high. The entire pile, Pat estimated, was about 300 paces long and 50 paces wide. The fingers streamed out of a single mass of pitted broken rock, seaming with ledges eroded by time into a multitude of twisted formations. "Come and get it," yelled Sam. Ezra strode in, and Pat picked his way over the heaping talus. With healthy appetites, the 4 tacked fried sour belly and beans, washed down by coffee that was sweetened with molasses. "Well, the needle ain't moved none," snapped Sam, bright eyes at Pat's lean figures. "Did you figure it would?" inquired the sheriff gravely. "'Pears kind of solid to me." "Well, how come you set us up there watching it?" "Thought maybe you might sight the Jasper up there who was keeping cases on us." "What?" gulped Sam. "You're telling me there's a galoot up there in them rocks?" "I'd stake my saddle on it," replied Pat calmly. "Shale doesn't spill for no reason at all. And who rustled Miss Ford's new gun belt?" "Gosh almighty," muttered Sam, his eyes sliding uneasily over the graying cliffs. "Maybe the hairpin's watching us right now." "Sure wouldn't surprise me." "Maybe we best be getting out a gunshot." "He don't know that we're on to him," chuckled Pat. "Get your chuck eaten up, and then maybe we'll smoke the buzzard out. And for gosh sakes, quit gaping around at the needle. You'll put him wise. He could pick you off like a squatting hen right now." "Dang blast it," groaned the squat rider. "You picked the doggonest places to make camp." Ezra's head bent over his tin plate, but his one eye ran over the weathered flanks of the pile. Pat and Bill were hunkered with their backs to the needle. The thought that a slug might smash into his back at any moment destroyed the taste of the beans Bill was consuming with gusto. The sheriff continued to eat as leisurely as though he was at his ranch house. Bill wiggled and Sam wriggled and swore under his breath, studying his eyes to keep them at the ground. "Through at last, you hog," he barked, when Pat finally set his empty plate on the side. "Can we hit for cover now?" "Oh, don't be getting frazzled," grinned Pat, proceeding to carefully build a cigarette. "Like I said, the Jasper don't know what we know. He'll hold his fire until he figures we're wise. We best be acting dumb." "That comes natural to Sam," rumbled Ezra. "Now, just mosey off easy like and grab your rifles and crowd close against the needle," directed Pat, his cigarette made. "He can't reach you when you're close to the needle." Nobody moved. Pat grinned. Don't want to show color, huh? Well, I'm real scared, so I'll drift. He rose leisurely and stretched and wandered over to his saddle, picked up his Winchester and drifted over towards the needle. Bill followed. The two-eyed Sam and Ezra sat hunkered by the fire. They were arguing loudly. One won't move before the other, chuckled Pat. I'll stampede those mossy horns. He jerked out his 6 gun and fired over their heads. With the roar of the explosion, the two flung themselves sideways, zigzagging their way towards their Winchesters like jackrabbits, and plunged towards the base of the needle. Panting, they stumbled towards the sheriff. You mangy flea-bitten coyote, howled Sam at the sight of Pat's smoking gun. Can't wait forever. He turned to Ezra. There's a trail up the needle there somewhere. Let's be going hunting it. Bunching, they commenced working around the base of that great rock pile, with Ezra in the lead. Pat claimed that the big redhead was a better trailman than any 2 Indian. Wading through knee-deep talus, clambering over heaps of rock fragments, sliding between massive boulders, the party had made a half circle of the needle when Ezra stopped, his one eye swiveling around. They were on the long side of the base to the west. On their left rose the shortest finger. Between it and the next was a narrow chimney, sloping inward. Above the chimney rose a rock wall almost perpendicular and worn smooth by the elements. It was apparent that no human could have scaled it. Some jasper's been around here aplenty, boomed Ezra. Look at the tracks, the riding boots and patched, and the scratches on the rocks. He sure went up that chimney. Why, doggone it. Ezra was staring upwards. Doggone if he ain't drove a spike. He pointed to where an iron short spike protruded from a crevice in the chimney. Pat set his Winchester against a boulder, unstrapped his spurs, and pulled on his riding gloves. You ain't going up there, flared Sam. Well, he sure ain't coming down. Let me shinny up there, offered Bill, pushing forward. I reckon my joints aren't as stiff as yours. Oh, can the wisecracks, barked Pat. Cover me. Might just as well as argue with him as a Missouri mule, growled Pat. Let's scatter and watch him fall down and break his stiff old neck. Rifles at the ready, the 3 backed out into the open, eyes searching the face of the needle. There were handholds aplenty on either side of the chimney, and Pat worked up quickly. At its head, he found himself on a ledge. On one side it was broken and impassable. On the other, it followed the side of a wide crevice. Hidden from below, the rock was sundered. The ledge disappeared into what seemed to be a tunnel. The sheriff shuffled forward, following the curve of the ledge. If the lookouts were on alert, Pat realized that he was up against long odds. At any moment, a slug might cut him down. But the sheriff was gambling that the man he sought was stationed over on the east side of the needle, facing the wall and overlooking the camping spot. If so, there was a sporting chance he might be taken by surprise. In a few minutes, Pat was in darkness, groping along the rock face with his hands and feeling forward with his feet before every step. Daylight glimmered ahead. The sheriff emerged at the bottom of a deep well, roundly circular in shape and roughly 20 paces across. It reminded him of sinkholes he had seen over there on the lava beds. 100 feet or more overhead, a small circle of blue sky gleamed bright. On one side of the well, spikes had been driven in at regular intervals. Pat commenced to climb from spike to spike. If the lookout caught him in that well, clinging like a fly to the wall, he thought grimly it was curtains for him. With comparable ease, he worked upward, shadowed by the prospect of sudden death from above. At length, with a gasp of relief, he reached the top and scrambled out into the blazing sun. Quickly, his eyes flickered around. Below lay the camp, so close he could have dropped a rock into it. A vast, dun plain, shivering through the quivering curtains of heated air, stretching eastward to the wall, somewhere behind which lay the fabulous Mirage Mine. On either side, fingers of the needle stretched skyward. 2 paces ahead was an abrupt drop to the plain below. Behind him was a perpendicular wall. Then he sighted a narrow ledge that twisted around the lofty pinnacle to his right, disappearing behind a bulge in the rock, ringing the uneven face of the finger that towered above. He stepped towards it, and then checked. The hairs of the back of his neck prickled. The ledge was scarcely a foot wide, narrower in parts. Below, it was a sheer drop of 100 feet or more. The only way it could be navigated was by shuffling sideways. A slip would plunge him to death below. But what lay behind the bulge, behind which the withering ledge disappeared? Maybe the lookout, waiting to blast him as he clung helplessly to the cliff face. For long moments, the sheriff hesitated, then abruptly jerked his gun into the holster and thrust it behind his waistband. Facing the cliff, he gingerly shuffled out upon the ledge, arms outspread, fingers clutching the rock crevices for support. Crab-like, he inched out towards the bulge, spilling dust and shale into the depths below. The ledge shrank as he slowly worked forward. He rounded the bulge of rock, heels hanging over space, and then froze. For another 20 paces, the ledge was faintly etched against the cliff face, and then widened to 6 feet or more, and then terminated into a gaping black hole, apparently the mouth of a large cave. In the mouth of the cave, shadowed by the overhanging rock, hungered a dark-featured rider, with a hawkish beak of a nose and unshaven jowls, his arms loosely folded, and a new gun belt sagging above his hips. He was dozing, with nodding head. Flattened against the cliff, his heels teetering over the space, the sheriff thought fast. If the guard awoke, he was dead meat. One shot would topple him off the ledge, to be mangled on the rocks far below. He could not draw his own gun and keep his balance. Should he shuffle back to safety or go ahead? Inch by inch, he edged forward, scarcely daring to draw breath, eyes on the sleeping lookout. Never did time crawl so slowly. 15, 14, 13 paces to go. The lookout's head twitched. Pat stood immobile, pulse racing madly. Again, he moved sideways, further and further. Now, 3 feet remained before the ledge broadened. Another 2 minutes, prayed the sheriff. Surely he couldn't fail now. Even as the thought entered his mind, the lookout quietly snapped awake. His black eyes blinked incredulously at the figure spread eagle against the cliff. He sprang erect, his gun arcing out of the holster. End of chapter 7.